Welcome to Mulready Minutes with Oklahoma Insurance Commissioner Glenn Mulready. This is a podcast about insurance for insurance folks, risk managers, and business leaders. We'll dive deep and look at what is and isn't working, talk to leaders in the industry, and keep you informed on what's happening in Oklahoma and around the country.
Welcome to another Mulready Minute. Excited this morning to have with us a special guest who's been with the department for quite a while. I've known for a very long time, but first time on the podcast. We're going to talk about a number of different things. So Mike Rhoads is with us. Mike, thanks for being with us on our podcast.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's nice to join the podcast family.
Welcome. I was going to read your bio, but why don't you, because a lot of people know you well. You've been around for a while, but tell us about your background and how you came to the department.
I've been around forever, but I am in my 14th year at the department. I have operational responsibilities here with consumer assistance, the Medicare Assistance Program, and the Fire Protection Division of the OID also. So there's lots of activity in those areas. We in the consumer assistance and Medicare assistance area, I kind of refer to those folks as the front door of the department. They receive the complaints. They answer inquiries of all the consumers here in Oklahoma. It's a very dedicated and committed group of people. So 14 years with the department. Prior to that, another 25 years with a large health insurance company here in the state. I had a little bit of break there where I thought I could be a consultant.
Oh, that sounded fun.
It was a little fun for maybe the first 2 or 3 weeks, and then you have to fly down to Dallas and Houston and everything else, and I have this aversion now to flying. But anyway, prior to that, it was 10 years in banking, so I think I'm giving away my age here.
So if you total that all up, you're like 36 years old.
Yeah, it's the 39th anniversary of my 39th birthday.
Yeah.
So something like that.
Good. Well, extensive experience, both in the health insurance field and now in the regulatory world with the department. So when you mentioned those different categories, we're gonna touch a little bit on each of those. But let's start with, I guess, an easy one. That you mentioned the fire protection class division. That's just something that not all departments do, and something that certainly in my 5 years we've certainly had great success with adding to some of those protection class 1. So talk about that.
Indeed, we have, and we have a representative that travels the state, has conferred with, consulted with 550 of the fire protection districts here in the state. And what we do is both educational as well as preparing them for their ISO survey. So an ISO rating is one of the determinants of what your homeowner's premium is. And if you are a Class 1, which is the highest level, you have the best possible and you have lots of discounts available to you. A Class 10, by comparison, is the lowest level, and you're paying a premium for being in a fire protection district with a Class 10 rating. Mm-hmm. So we have moved in the last 5-6 years, many of the fire protection, and these are fire departments, either voluntary or staffed, we moved these fire protection districts up classifications, which have saved consumers quite a bit of money on their homeowners policy. So if you want to live out in the country, I think that's great, but you got to check your fire protection classification. And if you're a 10, you're going to be paying more for fire protection because you're not in a non-hydrated area, and they have to haul water.
Don't have water, don't have equipment, different things like that. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I mentioned we've had great success. If I have my numbers right, I think when I came in office, we had 3 that were Class 1, and I believe now we have 8. And I've had the privilege of being at those press conferences as the city of Tulsa and the city of Broken Arrow and Edmond have announced they've reached the highest level. And so what your team does is, what I like to say out there when I'm meeting with fire chiefs is they help coach up the department so they're better prepared for that next audit or survey, if you will, of ISO. Yeah.
Yes.
Good. A lot of folks don't know we offer that service, but it is a great service that we do. Let's talk about MAP, Medicare Assistance Program, because we always need another acronym, but tell us about what Medicare Assistance does.
Medicare Assistance Program is these are federal granted programs that we operate on behalf of the department, but they are funded by federal grants. We have a SHIP program, Senior Health Insurance program, that helps educate seniors, Medicare beneficiaries, on what their options are relative to whether they are entering Medicare or if they're getting ready to make a change. Lots of activity during the Medicare open enrollment period in the fall. We also have what's called an SMP, that's Senior Medicare Patrol, and this is really a fraud component that we, along with our communications area here at the department, send out regularly to all the media as well as beneficiaries that there's scams going on. And, the real message there is don't ever give out your Social Security number, your Medicare number, any kind of PII, personal identifiable information, to anybody that calls it's unsolicited. So the SMP program continues to be making great strides in educating beneficiaries across the state. And then we have what's called a MIPA program. Don't ask me what that stands for because I can't remember. But anyway, it is a special assistance, extra help for individuals that are in the lower income brackets, and we can help them with their coverage, their Medicare coverage.
Yeah. And again, when I'm out meeting publicly, just yesterday I spoke to a group, and when I talk about it, I say that group is sort of advice and counseling to folks. We're not competing with brokers and producers out there in the community, but just sort of offering advice and counseling, and especially for those that are new coming into the Medicare programs.
And we always make mention of the fact when we are in outreach programs or at a health fair or whatever, we're not selling anything. We're here to educate you and let you know about your options.
Yeah. We had Ray Walker on previously on the program. We go get into the detail of what they do.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's. We're going to eventually land at consumer assistance because I think that's the biggest area of operation for you and our touch with the community. But let's talk about health insurance. You have an extensive background in health insurance previous to being at the department and really heading things up in the insurance department here in Oklahoma for the health insurance world. What kind of things are we seeing in the health insurance world?
Well, it's a dynamic market. It is stable and has been stable with respect to the individual health insurance market for the past several years. We can get into that in a little bit of detail, but let's talk about kind of what the numbers are here. Oklahoma still has a large percent of the population that's uninsured. And it's 12 to 13% of the population that still do not have coverage. And we know what happens there. There is, those costs are transferred to the insured market. So we have to recognize the fact that that's happening. In the regulated industry area, where we have group as well as individual, that represents about 20%, believe it or not, of the Oklahoma population. And the other 60% or so are self-insured. It's the Medicaid population, it's the Medicare population, even though we have some regulatory authority on Medicare supplements. But that represents the vast majority of the health insurance marketplace. And then, of course, there's the state employee program, 225,000 lives in that program, a large self-funded group that's funded by the state. So when you set the stage there, we have perhaps more impact with respect to what we are able to look at and regulate in the fully insured marketplace. Now, notwithstanding all those numbers, we regulate all the insurance companies that do business here. So we look for, as part of our financial division, their solvency. Are they able to pay their claims? Where are they with respect to their rating assumptions and everything else? We look at all those factors to make sure that they're operating within the guidelines of their license. The most dynamic portion of this in the last 5 or 6 years has been in the ACA marketplace, and we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, health insurance for individuals. I was going to mention that. When I got elected for this role, we had one choice here in Oklahoma, but that has improved greatly as far as options for folks. So talk about how that has changed over the last 5 years.
Yeah, we were between a rock and a hard place when you came in, and part of our strategy, as we talked about this, was to recruit new carriers into the state to offer this coverage. In 2024, we now know that there's about 275,000 individuals that are insured under the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, and they come and go. That's a fluctuating number, but that's typically a lot more than we saw back 5 or 6 years ago. Which the number was about 60,000. So that's grown exponentially over the last 5 years. And we do have 7 carriers that are now operating in this individual market space. And just let me mention them. It's Blue Cross, it's Community Care, it's United Healthcare, it's Medica, a company out of Wisconsin or Minnesota.
Up that way.
Yeah. It's Oscar Health Insurance. And a new one this year is Taro Health. Now, not all of these companies operate in all 77 counties. As a matter of fact, we have recently, with a reduction by Medica, which is now operating in 60 counties, the other carriers, Blue Cross and Blue Shield, is statewide with covering 77 counties with their networks there. But the other carriers here are operating in smaller service areas, typically around the urban areas, Oklahoma City and Tulsa. But they tend to expand every year or so with additional counties. And I might have missed, because I just remembered, we do have Celtic, also known as Ambetter, here in the state.
Yeah, and I was just talking about this with a group yesterday too. That when the plan comes into the state, they're going to start in the urban areas because that's where the people are.
That's
really
exactly
no different than a retail store. Now they may expand from there. We hope that they do, and we want to help them do that. But it's really just about where the people are, the most people, and the concentration. They can concentrate their efforts to kind of get a foothold, if you will. We have had some trouble though with a couple of companies that have left, and with that expansion, I know some companies came into the marketplace that folks wouldn't have heard of before. They're not the Blue Cross and the United that everybody knows and sees ads for, but companies that folks hadn't heard of, and then they had some trouble. Can you talk for a minute about what happened with that trouble?
Yeah, these were venture capital companies. They came in to not only Oklahoma but other states also. One of which was Bright Health, that operated in the state for a number of years, 2 or 3 years, but began to have financial problems. Whether that was because of their rating mechanism or whether there was some dynamic in another state that had high utilization. Not to say that we didn't have higher utilization in that population for that company, but they essentially elected to discontinue operations in Oklahoma, and I think that was in 2022, at the end of 2022. We also had a company that we took into supervision. We eventually took them into receivership, and that was Friday Health, unable to make their program work here, and that had more of an impact on those Friday members here in Oklahoma than perhaps Bright did, because they had to switch at mid-year, and they had to go to, if they wanted coverage, they had to go to another carrier, and their deductibles started over.
Yeah,
and this is a burden. This is a financial burden on these consumers.
Yeah, and they just ran out of capital too. Right? I mean, it's a capital-intensive world with reserves and surplus for companies. They ran out of that. So, but I might add, for folks that may not know that, in a situation like that, Mike just mentioned the company that we took over in receivership. Those claims get paid. We have a life and health guarantee fund. We have a property and casualty guarantee fund in the state of Oklahoma, and those claims get paid. We basically liquidate the company typically, to then put that money into the Guarantee Association to then pay those claims. But those do get paid, and if that liquidation is a deficit, then basically the other companies in that space are assessed for that. But so there is a backstop, a safety net for those situations.
And those are consumer protections that are so valuable. There is one protection that we do not have, and that is, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but the risk adjustment charge that a couple of these companies were unable to pay. And these are what the ACA tries to do is not pick winners or losers. So there are assessments, monies that have to be put aside to pay for these risk adjustments, and these companies were unable to pay for that. So those obligations and liabilities are still outstanding. The consumers have been taken care of or are being taken care of, but the insurance companies that operate in the ACA marketplace here in Oklahoma have obviously something on their balance sheets that shows they have not been paid for the risk adjustment for 2023.
Right. Okay. Let's shift gears to consumer assistance, which is your biggest area of responsibility and our most active touch point with the community. It's really appropriate given the storms that we've experienced here in the last 2 weeks. And so we are out constantly telling folks about that. But it's probably, unfortunately, a little bit of a secret that the insurance department has a consumer assistance area that when folks are frustrated or there's a problem, typically with a claim, that there's a place to turn to. But I know there's other services that are provided, even if it's just understanding their policy and who they have, any basic questions. So tell us about your consumer assistance team, sort of with the different things that they will handle, and then maybe some of those common things that are called into the consumer assistance line.
Well, we have two sections in consumer assistance. One is the life and health division. The other one is the property and casualty. And we have subject matter experts that work in those areas. So 15,000 calls typically a year that come into consumer assistance. They can vary from anywhere from, I'm having a claim problem with my carrier, can you help me? Whether that's life or health or property and casualty. And we open up an investigation. We have consumer assistance people that are in contact with these companies' compliance areas. And we submit an inquiry to them that simply asks them, what's going on with this claim? And they have 20 days to respond to our official inquiry. When we are in a time frame like we've had the last couple of 3 weeks, we are dispatching people to these tornado areas that have been impacted. And as a matter of fact, here later this week and into next week, we have representatives that will be at these multiple agency recovery centers and be able to do face-to-face meetings with consumers and talk about their claim, talk about how we can assist them if we need to initiate an inquiry. So we've got that talent, we've got that commitment to help these consumers not only help with their claim, but also to understand their policy. We have a lot of inquiries from seniors about their long-term care policies and what's happening in that insurance space also. So we have lots of activity. We continue to open up, dozens, if not 100+ claims a week in the consumer assistance area, and we're helping lots of consumers.
Yeah, and when I, especially even the last 2 weeks, what I talk about is, that we at the insurance department are second responders. We're not the first responders, so we really try to stay out of the way of some of these disaster spots in the immediate aftermath. And your team's real activity comes in week or 2 or 3 weeks later when someone might have a little frustration with a claim or adjuster has been slow in getting out there. And that's understandable with hundreds and hundreds of claims being filed in one storm. And then the other thing you mentioned too was that that time frame that the company has to get back. I might mention we made that change. I know after I came in office, that used to be 30 days. As we talked and reviewed things, that just seemed like a long time when someone was reaching out to us because it wasn't their first reporting of a claim. They were frustrated at some level, and so we got the legislature here to reduce that to a 20-day time period, which is much more the norm in our region and across the country.
And we will do expedited requests to get an adjuster out to look at a damaged roof or things of that nature. This is a really critical time for folks that have had, property damage or whatever. They need to get that claim started immediately. And, part of that process is to get an adjuster out there to look at this damage, to begin to assess what the loss is, and to get that claim process inside the company started.
Yeah, and you mentioned the multiple agency that'll be going on, I know, this weekend, and then next week, I think, in Marietta and Ardmore. And so these get set up after some of these disasters. And just, if you don't know, it's called a MARC, M-A-R-C, because I know we love acronyms, but it's sort of, they'll set up in a community center or in a high school gym or something where it allows folks that are impacted by that to sort of have a one-stop shopping experience, if you will. So the nonprofit Red Cross is there, and other nonprofit agencies, and FEMA is there, and the Oklahoma Insurance Department there. So we are part of that, and someone from your team usually is manning a table there to answer folks' questions and open up some claims. And speaking of opening up those case files, not claims, opening up a case file, 1-800-522-0071 is the number to call that would reach Consumer Assistance, and or on our website, oid.ok.gov. The very bottom of that page will be a box that says file a complaint, and a short form gets completed, and that's what your team is then receiving in from.
Indeed, that's called an RFA, another acronym, request for assistance, and that really gives then the department the authorization to look into this matter on behalf of that consumer, on behalf of that policyholder. So, that process is easy enough. It's either a paper form or you can fill that out electronically on our website. We encourage that electronic filing of that RFA. It's faster. We can get that case opened more quickly, and we can get some answers back to those consumers about what their claim problem may be.
Yeah. Well, we are there to help, and that's what I am plugging every time I speak publicly, is that we are there to help, and we've got a great team just waiting to assist folks, and especially after the aftermath of storms like we've had. I think that about wraps up our time, Mike. I just will say we are glad you're on our team, your wealth of experience, and after hearing all that, you've got a lot on your plate, so thanks for what you do.
Thank you, Commissioner. Happy to be here.
Good to have you. Okay, that wraps up our latest Mulready Minute podcast. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time.
If you found this episode informative, please subscribe and share with your colleagues. Visit oid.ok.gov/podcast. Let us know what topics you would like to hear about on this podcast. Until next time, take care from the Oklahoma Insurance Department.